Joined by the president and co-founder and a friend of mine, David Hogg, of Leaders We Deserve, to talk about all things happening with young people across the country, and specifically one young person to start, Donald Trump's granddaughter, who has been having some, I think we can call it more than fun, because that's allowed at the White House, but getting her grift on, and the post that Trump just made about it is kind of exposing what everything he does at the White House is focused on. That's the grift. We're going to get into it all, but I wanted to start with someone who I think so perfectly encapsulated what this administration is about. The young people who voted for it certainly weren't signing up. Jessica Tarlow broke that down right here, and then David and I have a lot to talk about.
And I just got a note that the staggering level of corruption from last night's meme coin dinner.
That's what you're focusing on, the meme coin.
No, 40% of Donald Trump's wealth has been accumulated since he became president because of 2 crypto coins. The New York Times did interviews with foreign buyers of this cryptocurrency who came over here to have dinner with him. A guy from South Korea.
This is not even part of the segment.
So what?
You're talking about a meme coin.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about who's corrupt and who is profiting off the American office.
Did he try to cover that up? I don't think so.
Yeah, Caroline Levitt said
you're defending an administration that covered up a dying leader, and you're sitting here going, but meme coin, meme coin.
I'm saying billions.
All right, let's give Paul a chance to clean it up real quick. Paul, final thoughts.
Clean on my side of the street.
All right, all I can say is that.
So Donald Trump, in the course of a couple of months, has made billions of dollars. The grifter in chief. Do you have friends who are into crypto?
Of course, I'm a young man. I'm sure you do too.
Have they made billions of dollars off of the American people in the course of their time in crypto?
They certainly also didn't crash the stock market and then say it's time to buy.
Didn't do
buy
that.
Millions of dollars in stocks.
Didn't do that. Not yet. Maybe we can all dream for it one day. But I think what's so interesting about the Trump crypto grift is that like young guys that I know who are like kind of loosely involved in it, they don't even like it because they think it makes a mockery of crypto. They think it's just kind of like bad for the industry as a whole, even though Trump has given the big crypto guys everything that they want. But on the topic of the grift, Donald Trump recently brought his granddaughter, Kai Trump, a young person of our generation, maybe not of our values necessarily, to the White House. And instead of just hanging out with grandpa or taking some photos with some friends, she decided she was going to launch her merch line. And the Wall Street Journal, not a particularly liberal outlet, wrote of it. Kai Trump, the president's granddaughter, launched a line of monogrammed $130 sweatshirts last week. Her promotional images in front of the White House have drawn some criticism, and they've drawn more than just criticism because now Trump, from his accounts, he's tweeting about it, promoting the merch. This is a violation of the Hatch Act. I know that sounds so ridiculous in an administration that is like breaking all of the laws. But how do you think our generation, people like struggling to afford the idea of affording a home right now, disproportionately like pushed out of this labor market, feel about Trump's granddaughter selling $130 sweatshirts from the White House lawn?
Well, I think if they weren't struggling as much to just feed themselves and get by, they certainly could think a lot more about things like this. But this is part of Steve Bannon's strategy of just flooding the zone constantly, right? His strategy, the sense that I think so many young people and people of all generations feel right now, just being exhausted and overwhelmed, that is the point, right? Yeah. It is so that people feel like this is just inevitable, that there is nothing that you can do. There's no point in fighting back. And that's ultimately what enables Trump to win, is by being so blatantly corrupt and overwhelming the system repeatedly. He gets people to do the work for him by just giving up and not even fighting back against him. And I certainly think for our generation, this is obviously blatantly corrupt. But whether it's that or the cryptocurrency stuff or anything else, people of any generation, I don't care if they're young or old, they don't like corruption. And I think this is one of the things that we have to absolutely nail Republicans on, is how blatantly corrupt they are. And that's why the candidates that we support at Leaders We Deserve, they don't take corporate money, because we want to show young people there are Democrats out there who represent you, who have your experience, and don't take corporate money to support things like campaign finance reform and taking on a lot of the groups out there that are dictating far too many of our policies right now, like AIPAC and others.
Yeah, I think that you have been beating this drum really, really loudly. And I think this is something that we talk about a lot on the show, is Democrats who make it difficult for us to communicate just how corrupt or lawless this administration is. And of course, comparing like a vote that, say, like an Alyssa Slotkin took on the Genius Act, which has allowed Donald Trump to run rampant with his crypto corruption because she got $10 million from the crypto lobby. Of course, that's not even in the same like stratosphere of a conversation as Trump's corruption. But when you're bought out by these industries, right, when you're bought out by these lobbies, and then you vote in favor of whatever they want, and it allows Trump to go forward with his corruption, it's kind of difficult to hear from those people calling out Trump. What's so different about the candidates? You've made some recent endorsements. Right. What's so different about those candidates?
Well, for example, we announced our first Democratic challenger this cycle to take on Sri Thanadar, who's in Michigan, and he voted for a lot of that crypto legislation and owns tons and tons of cryptocurrency himself. He's also taken nearly $1 million in taxpayer money that's supposed to be used to advertise, like, hey, like, reach out to my office if you have any questions, and use that to spend it on billboards of himself and other self-promotional ads at a rate that is multiple times higher than most other members of Congress. And the person who's running against him is Donovan McKinney, who's a state legislator who's been incredibly successful at getting millions of dollars for funding for violence intervention programs to combat gun violence by focusing on the root causes like joblessness and the trauma that drives gun violence, to getting millions of dollars to replace lead pipes in his community. And it racked up a ton of endorsements both from the center and the left side of the party because his opponent, Sri Thanadar, is so hated. It's kind of remarkable. So he's our first challenger that we're supporting, and he's not taking corporate money. He's on the opposite side of AIPAC and is actually helping to take them on because Sri has taken tons of money from AIPAC. And the candidates that we're supporting, what makes them different is, one, their lived experience, because they typically are community organizers, or they've been very successful advocates for their communities as elected officials, whether it's Donovan in Michigan or somebody like Christian Menefee, who's running in Houston, where the seat that he's running to replace in a special election, the two people that were there prior, literally both of them died one after another while in office. And the people in that district in Houston, the 750,000 or so people that live there, have not really had a member of Congress for the past 2 years because they've multiple times been incapacitated. And Christian Menefee, who's running in that seat, has taken on the Trump administration in court as a district attorney out there, and he's also taken on a lot of the oil industry in Houston that is infamous for polluting many black and brown and poorer communities across Houston.
Yeah, and of course you made a lot of noise when you were coming out and saying we need to primary Democrats. Like, this is insane that we have people dying in office, people not doing their jobs. Right here in D.C., our like pseudo kind of congressperson, she's been like 88. Like,
she's the oldest member of Congress.
It's insanity, and it's like, and in the House, Chuck Grassley still going strong, running again. But of course, like there's been some public pushback from the establishment, of course. But have you, like, what is different that you've heard from behind closed doors of maybe some people who, like, publicly, I think it's a little crazy that like the point of elected leadership in the House sometimes is to just like protect the caucus, even if that means protecting them from a challenger who would be better.
Right.
Do you hear different stuff? You don't have to name names, but like, do you hear different stuff behind closed doors from members who might like want some younger people around them, want some, more vigor in Congress?
Absolutely. I hear from tons of them that support us. People have come out publicly in support of this effort to help challenge people like Ro Khanna and some other members. But many of them, the majority of them that are supportive, aren't coming out publicly because they don't want to piss off their older colleagues, obviously, if they need their vote on a piece of legislation or something like that. But ultimately, we know that this is what many of the American people want. If you talk about what is some of the problems with Congress, people talk about the severe lack of youth representation there in terms of people who actually have the lived experience like Maxwell Frost has of knowing what it's like, even as a freshman member of Congress, of how hard it is to get housing because of how much it costs to run for office. And what Leaders We Deserve is really designed after is to be similar to Emily's List, where we help support young people in a substantial way, both financially and on the day-to-day of their campaigns and everything that they need, from advice to polling and any other way that we can help get them across the finish line.
Yeah, and earlier you talked about a point that I think really needs to be made about Trump to break this narrative in people's head of the inevitability. Like, this is something I've been talking about a lot. Like, when you see ABC, when you see Columbia, when you see law firms across the country pre-capitulate, it's because they think they're ultimately going to lose. But like, if you took any of these cases, like,
they'd probably win.
They would probably win. But it's this air of inevitability where it's like, why should we fight back? We're ultimately going to lose. I feel like a lot of young people feel that about getting representation in Congress, which is like, there's like, we are going up against so much money, so many establishment figures, like these people want to stop. Like, how do we break this idea that an old Congress and not that, having some experience is wrong, but like
Right.
there is some times when some people need to get the fuck out of Congress, or like it's impossible to primary people. It's impossible to have like this insurgent campaign. How do we change that idea in people's minds, do you think?
I mean, I think we just have to run people in primaries in safe seats around the country. Let me be clear. I don't want us to lose the House because, somebody gets challenged in a purple seat, and that's not what Leaders We Deserve is doing. We're challenging people that are in safe Democratic seats that are pretty much almost certainly going to remain Democratic. And I think what we're seeing, I think what we need to do in order to help prove the point more is by electing more people like Maxwell, more people like AOC and others who do challenge people in primaries and show how much better things can be. I mean, imagine if AOC wasn't there right now.
Yeah.
Right? How much harder.
What would we be doing?
Right? And on top of that, even after she was elected, because she went after one of the most powerful Democrats and defeated him because he wasn't showing up in his district and doing the work of being a member, the system, much of the machine of the party turned on her for a long time, except for the fact that she was so popular and good at her job that they had to end up dealing with her and acknowledging the fact that she is good at what she does.
Yeah, and I think that's something that AOC accomplishes so well, something that Zoran accomplishes so well, Graham Plattner as well, like these are kind of the young.
I interviewed him on his oyster farm.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
On his oyster farm?
Yeah, I think it was 3 weeks before his election.
I'd love to, honestly. Not an oyster guy, though.
Yeah.
I can't do the oysters.
Well, the oysters were excellent.
They were? Okay, maybe I'll have to change my mind on that. But the something that, like, these candidates or these electeds do really well is just, like, explain. I think that they make government very accessible and they get people engaged just because they make it clear how you can get involved, how you can make change. What would you want people who feel themselves separated from like the campaign process, a young person interested, and it doesn't have to be running for Congress, even the state legislature, like what is it that you want them to know about government that you think animates young people to get involved more?
That the hopelessness that Donald Trump wants all of us to feel, that is only something that we can give him. And what you need to do is to find at least there's no way that any single person is going to fix all of this. And if that did exist on the Democratic side, we have a bigger problem because that's a dictator, right? In democracy, if you want 100% of what you want, you need 100% of the power, and that's not possible for it to be a democracy at the same time. So what I would say to those young people is to get involved on a campaign, whether it's volunteering on a campaign that you believe in. It doesn't have to be Congress. It can be a state legislative race where there's a lot more power, I would argue, to some extent than there is in Congress. And getting involved in a local race like Zoran's race in New York City. And when we have candidates like Zoran who's out there, we were one of his largest financial supporters. We gave the independent expenditure effort in support of him $300,000 in the weeks leading up to the election.
A lot of people talk about that. That's big time.
And we helped to bundle that money. I mean, we came in later in the election, obviously, but we wanted to make sure that as he was being outspent so much that we did everything we could to get him across the finish line. And the reason for that isn't only because he's an excellent communicator, but it's because of the effect that he's had on young people in New York. When we showed up together in Washington Square Park to make a video, unannounced even, hundreds of young people came up to him, some of whom were teenagers that not only knew his name, but could recite parts of his platform back to him. And what stuck with me from that was the look of hope that they actually had in their eyes. And that's what we need a lot more of in our party because it translates into electoral wins, where Zoran ended up getting 3 times the vote or the turnout of 18 to 24-year-olds in the election compared to Kamala Harris just a couple months prior. And if we can't learn from that, I don't know what the future of our party, I don't think we have much of a future in our party if we can't learn from somebody who so clearly listened to his constituents, listened to voters, and built a policy platform that they actually believed in, where he didn't go out there and just say, oh, we need to lower costs. He talked about how are we actually going to do that? And I think that's one of my biggest critiques of Democrats is we need to get more specific. When we talk about taking on special interests, what are we talking about? What are the special interests that we want to take on? If we're going to take on corporations, what are the corporations? Why are they bad? What are we doing? How do we combat it? Right? Voters are tired of just being told vague talking points instead of being given concrete answers of what we're actually going to do with the power if they give it to us.
Yeah, I think that we do, and that's part of the explanation. And I love that point about like making very like specific efforts to say like this is actually what we're going to do. But on the point of Zoran, like it's difficult to be as like charming and as charismatic and like he's just like a cool guy that you want to hang with. But like what besides just like the work of communicating, what do you think should be kind of like the party's goal in finding more people like that? Like, how do you think that we can seek those people out? Or do you think that they just kind of come up on their own?
To be honest with you, and this may be more of a controversial take, I think to some extent when the parties have historically been involved in recruitment efforts to get people, they pick people based off of forms of, you've done favors for me here, so now I'm going to help you here, and it's just like political patronage instead of asking ourselves, is this person actually the most qualified and, best communicator to explain to people not just what we're doing, because unfortunately it's not enough for us just to do things. If it was, Kamala would have won the election, right? We need to actually...
We did a lot of shit.
We need to explain to people what are we doing to actually help them, and speak to when they say like prices are too high. Explain to them what we're doing to combat that instead of telling them, actually they're not, look at the stock market. Or actually the president isn't old because, look at X, Y, and Z thing, and instead say what we're doing about it instead of feeling like we can gaslight them with $2 billion in spending.
I think that you brought up the Biden point. I want to talk about this, and I want to get us a plug for Leaders We Deserve. All of that's going to be down below. We're going to get a plug, but you brought up the Biden thing, and I've had a couple of conversations about this. Right now, the Democratic Party, everyone's talking about the brand. I think part of fixing the brand is trust. You have been very, very loud in saying, I wish that when I met with Biden, was it in 2023, 2024? You're like, I wish that I had said to him, drop out, man. Like, we need a primary. We need new ideas. We need a person who can get through a full speech or a full debate. And I think that Democrats feel hesitant to do that. And I think even when you were saying that, people were pushing back and going, well, David, like, why are we even talking about this right now? You said it during like Kamala's campaign. And they were like, well, why are we like, just say good things about Kamala. Stop talking about Biden. But upon reflection, and I think everyone should have said it then, is like, we need to show that we recognize that that was a mistake. And you can love Joe Biden if you want. You can think that his domestic policy, and his domestic policy alone, was some of the most profound that we've seen in decades. But at the same time, Joe Biden dropped out. Like, Joe Biden admitted he shouldn't have been running for president. Why do you think it's so important for Democrats to say that right now? Like, people not even if you're running in 2028, but just saying it now.
Well, I think if you're asked about, I don't think it should be the center thing that we're talking about necessarily, because there's other pressing issues, and I don't imagine he's going to run for president again. But Biden 2028. And to be clear, I think there is a lot of great stuff that he did, especially on guns, where we saw about we saw the two largest reductions in gun homicide in American history under his administration, two largest one-year reductions at least, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's a really big deal, and I'm forever grateful for the work that he did on that. But it's possible to both be thankful for what somebody has done and also acknowledge the fact that they shouldn't have run again for that position. And I think if people ask candidates or ask us, like in the DNC race, there were people who said, like, should Joe, some of the town halls that they did for the chairs and for the vice chairs, they said, should Joe Biden have run again? And the number of non-answers that I heard was insane, where they're like, we need to leave this to the historians to talk about. It's like, no. The man literally didn't run again. He knew that he shouldn't have run again, and ultimately dropped out because of that. And I think our party is too uncomfortable with telling saying what we actually need to hear instead of just what we want to hear. And we love to say that we're not a cult. I certainly think that the Republicans obviously are much more of one, but I do think it's important to acknowledge we can have our own problems too, where if somebody goes out there and said, just look at how people were treated when they're like, I don't know if Biden should be running for president again, and we ostracized them. We basically excommunicated them for a time from the party, where it was like, I can't believe you'd say that, all this other stuff, instead of having a real conversation about whether or not he's able to meet that moment and what can we do to set up Kamala Harris to be in the best position possible to be the presidential nominee, instead of putting her on a glass cliff, by making her things like the borders are and other things like that at the same time. And I think all this really comes down to us just being a lot more honest with ourselves and with the American people, and not trying to just say, don't pay attention to reality. Pay attention to these ads that we're going to spend billions of dollars on and give people generational wealth through, instead of actually acknowledging, it's easier than just raising a ton of money to spend on ads to try to change people's perception of reality, is to change the reality.
Yeah, and have a message that just actually breaks through. What are you hearing from people who just come up to you? Like when you were in Washington Square Park with Zoran, like what were they saying? Like obviously they were talking to him about his campaign, but like you're at a bar, some guy comes up to you. I've had dudes at bars been like, David? I'm like, yes, I do. And he's out there and he's, yeah, I do. And they're like, I fucking love that he's calling out the bullshit, calling out the establishment. What is it that people come up to you and is like their number one thing? After they're like, what's up, man?
Well, it's funny you asked that, because literally on the way here, I was on the metro and I saw a guy staring at me, and I'm like, I was a little suspicious. And then I was about to get off and he came up to me. It was a younger guy, probably in his 20s. And he was like, I just wanted to say thank you. We need so many more young people that are out there. And that's a lot of what people are saying. And interestingly enough, the people that come up to me most often to say that we do need younger people in office are old people. Sorry, not old.
Older.
Senior people. or
with wisdom.
Yeah,
and we love you.
More experienced people. And that's one of the things I hope people understand about Leaders We Deserve is that our work would not be possible without people of all generations donating to us, because I think there's a certain amount of guilt that some older people feel where they're like, God, we really like screwed things up, and you guys, like, we need to help you guys. But they aren't running away from it. Most of the people that are at the No Kings protests are older,
big time.
And I think that's great, but we also need to investigate why there are not young people there at the same time, which is very concerning. And I think we also need to just not write off young people either, because I think where we are right now is that young people feel like they're 9 feet underwater, and the message they hear from the Democrats is like, well, what if you were 8 feet underwater? And then the Democrats say, well, the Republicans want to put you at 11 feet underwater. And it's like, either way, I still can't breathe. And what they're going to be looking for is anybody reaching down that says like, hey, like, I can pull you up. If it's a Republican that does that, whoever does it as quickly as possible is what they're going to go for. And that's why I think we shouldn't just write off our young people. I think we can win them back. But what we're going to need is a compelling message for them of not just saying, oh, we need to lower costs. We need to make life easier. How? How are you going to do
something aspirational that's not just combative? Like, our generation is feeling the effects of this administration right now. Like, there has never been a time in recent history where youth unemployment tracked so much farther behind just the average. And so we're feeling it. We're feeling the effects of AI. We're feeling the effects of wealth being accumulated at the top. We need representation. Y'all are doing that. I want to give you the opportunity. I'm going to scoot over. Direct to camera. Cheap plug. Not cheap plug. Good plug. Important plug.
So if you can, our work at Leaders We Deserve, our candidates don't take corporate money. We don't take corporate money either. And that means that we rely on small dollar donors around the country to support our work. If you can, please donate $5 or $10 or whatever you can at our website, leaderswedeserve.com. Because that enables us so that we aren't funded by any single one person or any just couple dozen of people like a lot of PACs and super PACs, so that when we do go out there and support somebody like Zoran, and a donor calls me, for example, and says like, I'm not going to give you this substantial amount of money because I don't agree with Zoran, even though he got 2/3 the 18 to 24-year-old turnout, I can say, I understand, and our organization's work can continue and truly be independent and mission driven and not controlled by any single major donor or anything like that. So we count on your small dollar support to do this work, and if you can, please donate at leaderswedeserve.com.
Need more people in the fight. David, I know the audience appreciates it. I certainly do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, man.